Hey, thanks for joining me for this video. If you've watched some of my previous videos, you probably have heard me say that I'm really looking for products that are unique and different versus things that I have reviewed in the past. And man, have I got a pretty good lineup coming for you in the weeks ahead. So the next handful of videos are going to have some really unique, interesting products. So stay tuned for that. Today's video is going to be right in there as well. This is the Zendure SuperBase Pro 2000, and it's got some very unique characteristics. So let's find out if it's worth a look. All right, I got to get this thing out of the box so we can take a look and see what's inside. Instead of doing my usual fast forward unboxing, this thing is so big, I'm just going to kind of just cut to that. All right, we've got a case. I'm not exactly sure what's in here. We're going to take a look at that in just a minute. And the SuperBase Pro 2000. All right, so I haven't actually had a once-over on this yet, so I'll get to that in a minute. Let's find out what's in this cool little large capsule-looking case. First of all, I would say that the zipper is waterproofed, so this is a waterproof case. And we have got a very large gauge AC adapter, or AC cable, not an AC adapter, but an AC cable. So quite a few cables in here. Right, here is a XT60, pretty heavy gauge, to MC4. So this is a solar panel cable. So this is really bizarre. I've never seen something like this. Now we've got kind of the same cable that's on this AC cable here, the same cable connector, the little three-prong deal. But on the other end, instead of the three-prong wall plug, we've got MC4 connectors. So this just gets really interesting, does it not? This is a Type A, kind of a quick charge 3.0 type connector to a Type C connector adapter. All right, now we have got a sheet of stickers because reasons, why not? Who doesn't like stickers? We have got the 24-month warranty card. And then we have got a basic user guide. This is just like a getting started guide with a QR code on it. So unless I'm missing something, there are some just some basic specs and getting started type tips on here with a QR code on how to download the app and get the additional information. But before we jump forward in time and talk about the test results, the kinds of things you can run with it, the usable capacity, and all that other stuff, let me just throw a couple of terms out that I'm going to tease you with, because these are things we're going to talk about. So IoT, 4G, GPS, those are all things we're going to talk about that are related to this. How are they related? Let's jump forward and find out. All right, so we have jumped forward. It's been about 3.5 weeks since you saw me a few seconds ago. And in that time, I have run this thing through some tests. And some of those tests were very surprising, actually, as you're going to find out. We'll get into that here in a little bit. But let's kind of give you a rundown of what this thing is all about. So first of all, this thing, I think, lists for $16.99, I want to say, on Amazon. Wouldn't surprise me if there are some Black Friday deals this coming week. Check down below in the links below in the description of the video to see if maybe there are some cool Black Friday deals going on. But that's already, based on what I'm seeing, that $16.99 is actually a pretty decent price for what you're getting. So let's talk about what this thing is. So first of all, the rated capacity of this is 2,095 watt hours. And let's just kind of jump into some of the things that really jumped out at me. When I was testing the actual usable capacity of this, I ran it through my usual battery of tests, pun intended. And what I found on the DC side was that this thing actually output 1,968 watt hours, which is 94% of rated capacity, which easily puts it, based on DC output, in the lead for pretty much any other power station that I have tested. Usually you get something like 84%, 81%, something. I think 84 is about average, but 94% is definitely a standout. But it doesn't end there. I ran an AC discharge test on that, and I'll run some video of me doing that up here while I'm talking. And the test result I got on my first AC discharge test was 2,149 watt hours. So I thought, that can't be right. So I charged it back up again, and I ran the test again. And this time I got 2,107 watt hours. Now, both of those numbers are more than 100% of the rated capacity. So Zendure is apparently not playing around. They are actually rating these things at more or less what you will get. So instead of having to take the number and multiply it by 80% of the rated capacity to get approximation of usable capacity, at least with this unit, I'm getting basically 100% on the AC side. So very impressive, very surprising. So let's talk about some of the other things that this thing does that are unique, because there are a number of things. So this is a pure sine wave inverter, and it does have a capacity of 2,000 watts continuous draw up to 4,000 watts peak. I did run it through the test. I'm not going to bore you with that because I have a lot of ground to cover, but I just will tell you that it does 2,000 watts continuous, no problem, and it will cut you off if you exceed 2,000 watts for any length of time. Every, say, a few seconds, it'll cut you off. Now, this does have an amp up feature that you can enable in the app, and we're going to talk about the app in a little bit as well. Don't worry. But the amp up does give you the capability to run devices like heating devices or small space heaters and things like that that might want to draw more than 2,000 watts that would normally trip the overcurrent protection on this. But in this case, if you have amp up engaged, it will allow devices up to 3,000 watts. It'll just throttle them back so that they run at basically the max of 2,000 watts. So they run in a lower power state. Now, as I've said with other power stations that have similar functionality, it's not suitable for all devices. And if you're not sure, you kind of want to monitor a device if you're going to run it in amp up mode to see how it performs, because some things just aren't going to like that. But as I said, things like space heaters and the like probably will do just fine. Now this thing does have super fast charging, so it'll draw 1,800 watts from an AC outlet, assuming you allow it to draw 1,800 watts, because you can configure that in the app, which is very cool. So if you have a circuit that you want to charge this on that is already being taxed, and maybe it's a 15 amp circuit and you've already got it halfway loaded up, maybe you only want to charge this thing at 800 watts. Now there are other reasons why you may not want to charge it at 1,800 watts. Like, for example, you want to be gentle on the thing and squeeze as much battery life as you can long term out of this thing, in which case maybe you don't want to maximize it at 1,800 watts every time you charge it if you're not pressed for time. So you can throttle that back in the app and really maximize the overall lifespan of the battery in this unit. So the AC charger itself is integrated. You just plug it into the side. There's no extra charge brick. So I do like that. That's becoming more and more common especially among these larger capacity power stations, but even among some of the smaller ones as well. So not having to juggle the AC power brick is kind of nice. Now let's talk about solar charging, because this is where this thing really kind of gets interesting, because it is very unique. So there are basically two ways that you can solar charge this. There's an XT60 connector, and I'll pop a little picture of that up here on the screen for you, but it's a little XT60 connector on it. And you can charge up to 600 watts with 600 watts of solar through there. So it's a maximum of 60 volts input and a maximum of 10 amps on this little XT60 connector. So that's fine. That will get you somewhere in the neighborhood to recharge this thing in about 5 hours, plus or minus, depending on your sky conditions. But if you've got more solar to throw at this thing and you want to charge this thing faster, maybe you've got a very narrow time window of sun that particular day before the clouds start rolling in, and you just want to have the option. If you've got the solar to throw at it, you can use this cable, which I tested earlier today, and I'll put a picture of that up. Now, I didn't have 1,800 watts of solar to throw at this thing, but that's what you could throw at this thing. So it's got dual MPPT charge controllers on this, and you can actually charge it via AC while you're charging it through the XT60 connector to get 2,400 watts of charge time on this, which would allow you to tap this thing out from 0 to 100% in just an hour and a half. But you can also use this for solar, which is very cool. So I was able to put my 800 watt solar array into this thing, and by the way, I used this thing to build my 800 watt solar array. So I was able to run a hammer drill to drill in through my concrete foundation to pass my MC4 cable, solar cable, into my basement area. So now I can charge these things inside without having to take them outside. I was able to run my miter saw my regular drill, all that stuff. So I hopefully have put some clips up there of some of that. But I was running those power tools, at least the ones that aren't battery operated. I was running those all off of this unit, no problem at all. And some of those are pretty high amp draws, so especially that hammer drill when it's really getting a lot of resistance, it pulls a lot of power. But this thing handled it no problem. Now this thing also does act as an offline UPS, so 13 millisecond switch over time. It's great for computers if you want to put this up, in your computer room when you want to make sure that your computer or other important device doesn't shut off in the event of a power outage. This will switch over in 13 milliseconds. That's proven in my test to be more than enough for my video editing computer, for example. I'm still feeling in my lower back, by the way, from that solar array build that I did over the weekend. And having this thing with wheels and a telescopic handle, super handy, very much appreciated. Speaking of that, by the way, I think this thing weighs about 46 pounds. So it's not a lightweight, but it's not the heaviest one that I have reviewed. But it's about average for a 2,000 watt unit, I would say. I've already talked about the DC discharge and the AC discharge and how impressive that was. From a no-load draw standpoint on the AC inverter, that will consume about 1.5% as long as you allow the inverter to run. Now that's fully configurable. You can turn that off in 30 minutes. You can have it shut off if no power is being drawn in 1 hour, 2 hours, 4 hours, I believe. There's multiple increments. And then you can also say just never shut off unless I turn it off. You can configure all that in the app. So that's very cool to have that flexibility if you've got a very intermittent or a very low power draw device and you don't want this thing to shut down after just a few hours. So what can you run with this thing? Well, obviously you can run pretty much all of your power tools. You can run a refrigerator. This thing will run my full-size refrigerator for about 20 hours, which is pretty good. That means that I can pretty much sustain that refrigerator with solar input during the day and run my full-size refrigerator off this indefinitely, as long as I don't have days where I don't get at least 4 hours of sun. That's a bit of a deal breaker for 2,000 watt hours, but for most cases in emergency situations, this will do the trick. You could also run air fryers. You could run microwaves. You can run coffee makers. This will handle high-end large coffee makers, no problem. Electric griddles or burners, fans, electric blankets, lights, all the obvious things. So anything that draws a maximum of 2,000 watts is fair game for this power station. So let's talk about the ports on this. I didn't really cover that in much detail, but it does have 6 AC ports on the side. It's got the 12 port socket, or the 12 volt socket that'll handle 13.6 volts, 10 amps on the side, your biggest basic cigarette lighter adapter. And it does have all Type C connectors, which is cool. And that is why they gave me that little Type A to Type C adapter, because all of the connectors here are Type C. 2 of them are PD 100 watt, great for charging MacBook Pros, Microsoft Surface Pros, any of your high-end laptops that have PD charging capability. This will charge those no problem. And then it's got a couple of, I think, 20 watt Type C connectors, kind of your standard Type C, basically equivalent to Quick Charge 3.0, which I think is 18 watts. And then you've got 3 DC 5521 accessory ports here. And those combined with the 12 volt port on the side can handle up to 136 watts in combination. So you can't draw more than that in total if you have multiple devices plugged in on these DC ports. So let's talk about 4G. This currently I've got 4G turned on. You do that by long pressing the DC button for 3 seconds and then it turns on 4G. And then I can connect to it from anywhere from the app. And I can also locate it using GPS, which is very cool. Now this, as I understand it, is still under development and the 4G service is free for a year. And I think if you want to continue 4G service after that, you have to pay some kind of annual fee. And I don't know what that is. They weren't able to tell me at the time. So that's a bit of an unknown. But you do have, it does have its own Wi-Fi access point that you can enable by long pressing the Wi-Fi button up here. Now it does not have Bluetooth. They are developing a Wi-Fi direct connection, I believe, but it's not available at this point. And there is no Bluetooth, which is a little bit of a miss. I would like to have Bluetooth because in order to connect to it to Wi-Fi, I have to switch my phone over to a Wi-Fi network that does not have internet access. So I lose internet access on my phone. I can't do internet and managing this at the same time. I have to switch it back and forth. But speaking of the app, let's jump in and take a look at what the app looks like. All right, here we are on the Zendure app. And you can see that it detects my SuperBase Pro 2000 is connected via 4G and it currently has a charge of 23%. So I just sort of tap on that tile. And you can see I've got a big graphic in the middle showing 23%. And if I had any inputs going on the DC or the AC side, it would show that. Or outputs on DC or AC, it would show that. If I click on the DC, little round DC tile there on the lower right-hand corner, you can see that shows me the individual USB-C ports. All right, and I can also turn on the AC port. I'll press that button, and you can probably hear the unit click on in a minute. There it beeped. All right, so you can also adjust the lighting on here, so you can turn the lights on and off. And even though you can't see that, I can adjust the brightness and the color, which is kind of cool. And then under the little gear here, you can go in and you can set other aspects. So the automatic shutdown time, you could turn that from anywhere from 30 minutes to 12 hours or never. You could turn off and on the little beep sounds, temperature units to Fahrenheit or Celsius, and you can update the firmware, which I have had to do twice already since I've had it. All right. Let's see if we can connect this via Wi-Fi instead of 4G, and then we'll see what that looks like. So here you can see I have a P2P option. I'm going to go ahead and click that. I already did press the Wi-Fi button. I heard the buzzer, and I'm going to select the SuperBase Pro from my available network. You can see it shows up there at the top. And then once you're connected without internet, you can kind of backspace into here, and then it will connect to the device using Wi-Fi. So you can see this looks a little bit different. So they've added some functionality here in the last update, which is kind of cool. So I can, enable the AC and the DC ports just like I can. It's actually a little bit faster because it doesn't have to go over the 4G to get a little handshake confirmation that the action was successful or not. So it's a little bit snappier through the Wi-Fi connection. But notice up there where it says disconnect, prior to that it had a settings option. So the settings are now down here on the bottom. So it's really two different aspects of the same application here. And here I can set the temperature units and turn the sounds on and off, and the automatic shutdown time, and the screen standby. So basically the same functions that I can get to through 4G are available to me here as well. So anyway, that is about all with the app. So I do like the functionality of the app. I feel like they're still developing it right now. In fact, I had 2 firmware updates in the 3.5 weeks that I was testing this. So they're very actively improving that, and the app actually improved significantly from the first version of the app that I had. And they updated the firmware, and I had to update the app, and all of a sudden, because I wrote them, and I'm like, why are half of the configuration options not available on the Wi-Fi connection that are available on the 4G? And they wrote back and said, what are you talking about? It's the same type of settings. You can do the same things. And I was like, no, you can't. And then I went in and realized, oh, I have a firmware update. And when I updated it, lo and behold, they had fixed all that. So they are actively developing the app and improving it. So that's very cool. All right, so let's talk about the elephant in the room. All right, so the battery chemistry on this. This is a lithium NMC, or nickel manganese cobalt. That's the same chemistry that the Jackery uses in the industry, and also a variety of other manufacturers still use lithium NMC for some of their power stations. And in fact, if that happens to be a deal breaker, and I'm not sure that it really should be, because I'll explain that in a minute, but they do offer the SuperBase Pro 1500, which is a lithium iron phosphate chemistry. So if you're not convinced that you can live with lithium NMC, they do offer a lithium iron phosphate version. It's the 1500, not the 2000. But before you assume that lithium NMC is not going to get it done for you, let me just kind of dial that in. I think it really depends on how you intend to use this power station. If you are going to fully charge and discharge this thing pretty much every day, then yes, I would recommend that you maybe consider the lithium iron phosphate version versus the lithium NMC. But this thing is rated for 1500 cycles, at which point it should still have maintained equal to or greater than 80% of its original capacity. Now what that means is full charge down from 100% to 0 back to 100%. That is one full cycle. Now if you're like most people, you're not going to be fully charging and discharging this thing every single day. In fact, to say 50% charge and discharge every single day of the year is still probably a gross overestimation of how most people will use a power station like this. But let's say you are going to use it at a 50% discharge charge cycle rate every single day of the year for multiple years. That's still going to give you more than 10 years of life cycle where you're still going to maintain 80% of the battery's original capacity. And the fact that you're getting virtually a 100% of rated battery capacity on this thing instead of 80% right out of the gate is just another bonus, in my opinion. So I really think that the Zendure SuperBase Pro is definitely worth a look. I would recommend going and checking this unit out. It's really one of my favorite units, and I don't say that about all the units. Some of the units I review I like very much, but they don't really rank up there as necessarily my favorite. This one is definitely one of the top units that I have reviewed to date, and I really do like this unit. So hopefully you found some of this information useful. If you did, please consider giving me a thumbs up. I would really appreciate that. This unit really is worth a look if you're in the market for something in that 2,000 watt-hour range. I really can't recommend this thing enough. So I've got a bunch of stuff in the pipeline. In fact, the pipeline is very full. We're going to talk in the next coming videos about that 800 watt solar array that I just recently built. And we've got a variety of very cool, again, some very unique featured power stations and solar panels, and some other stuff coming up that I'm not going to tell you what it is yet, but there's a lot in the pipeline, let me just say that. So I do hope to see you in that next one. Until then, have fun out there.